Alright, so maybe it wasn't after work after all. When I got off shift this afternoon, I got a call from the weekend nursing supervisor who was reporting off to me for the overnight shift. And that kind of came as a surprise to me. I remember picking up some overnights. I don't remember tonight being one of them. But I need the shifts, so I did not complain. And boy, has it been a busy one. Man, I have not had time to sit down since 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right now it's, what time is it now? It's about 10:15 in the evening. And I'm, driving through towns that have no power and all that good stuff still, having to store. Yeah, it's been non-stop. I've been running around all over the place. Just visited a group home. Group homes are interesting because the way their orders work and the way their nurses work is a little bit different than nursing homes or home care or hospitals. I was lucky enough to have another nurse meet me there. Another nurse was on the way who worked for the group home, I think for the state. I think it was a state group home. And so I had somebody there to collaborate with, who apparently didn't know him very well, but she seemed like a really good clinician, and she was really fun to collaborate with. We really put our heads together and got some symptom management under control. I took a drive really far away. I've been driving far away all day today. I drove really far away to deliver some incontinence care supplies to somebody. And now that I'm keeping incontinence care supplies in my car, that saves me one extra trip. But the person was very apologetic over the phone. But I'm happy to come out and do it. And I had a good sit down and chatted with them about some stuff. And I've noticed that I'm really good at upselling people to more services. Like for whatever reason, people don't want this service or that service that they really need. It's like hard to convince people that they need more help, especially when they're not only very like individualistic and very independent, but also slowly becoming more and more confused. It gets harder and harder to sell people on that idea, and you don't want to wait until they can't make any decisions anymore. You want to, get people in on the decision making while they can still get in on it. But I feel like I've gotten very good at upselling people to these services that they don't want, and I guess I can attribute that to my training as a salesman, which was, relatively short-lived. I wasn't in sales for that long. But with the role-playing exercises and the stuff that they taught you, I never was really able to leverage it into being a good salesman, but I think I have leveraged those skills into talking people into accepting help that they really don't want to admit that they need. And the services are so important, they're so spectacular, we want everybody to have them. Because, we get paid for providing them, and our agency gets paid for providing them, and we all get paid. So I guess it is a little like salesmanship in that sense, but we don't make any extra, personally, whether they say yes or no. It just factors into how many shifts are available. But the services are really stellar, and one of them that I have to talk people into sometimes is home health aid services. Getting a nurse's aide to come into the home. That's really difficult for a lot of people to accept, and they will coerce their family into providing those services well beyond the point that they can cope with sometimes. So that's definitely something that we're all trained to cope for That's something we're all trained to assess for when we walk into a situation. How well is everybody coping? And if people are not coping very well, then we've got a lot of great tools at our disposal to address the issues that are causing people to not cope very well. It's not that complicated. In addition to home health aides, which are phenomenal, there's also volunteers. And volunteerism is a very interesting part of the hospice business, of the hospice and palliative care business, because I guess part of the stipulation of the Medicare hospice benefit, the special section of Medicare that these benefits flow from, is that one of the requirements is that a certain percentage of your services need to be supplied by volunteers. And this is a pretty low percentage. I forget what it is exactly. I think it's like 5% or something, or 10% of your total services have to be furnished by volunteers. Not the nurses or home health aides, obviously, they're not volunteers, but things like massage and respite care, and family visitors, and helping people with groceries and stuff like that that people who are unlicensed can do. And our agency, one of the things that I'm very proud of about it is that the percentage of its services that are furnished by volunteers are much higher than required, something like double or maybe triple the required percentage of whatever, including like licensed massage therapists and Reiki volunteers. And even though they're called volunteers, they do get paid per visit, but they're still technically considered volunteers. I'm not sure exactly how that works out, but those are two extremely valuable services to be able to offer people. Like aromatherapy, all the complimentary stuff is done on a quote-unquote volunteer basis. And then there's respite care. We get people who will come and sit with people so their family caregivers can get away from the bedside and take care of their own business for a little while. And companionship and friendly visitors is a great thing to be able to offer if only people would accept it. And we do a lot of interesting stuff with that too. Like if one of our patients is a veteran of, like, say, the Navy, we'll send other Navy veterans to sit with them and hang out and do whatever they want to do. And one of my elder nurse mentors at the agency related to me the experience of one patient who everybody was just hovering over him all the time, and it was just weirding him out. It was really difficult for him to cope with. So we sent over a volunteer who just hung out, watched TV with them, drank a beer with them, and they could just hang out and be guys, which is something that's really hard to do if you're laid up in the hospital or the nursing home. You're on you're on an alien planet. There are certain parts of your life that might seem really important, or you might take them for granted, that might totally go away when you're in a facility. Sexuality is a big one that doesn't get discussed often enough. I actually read some kind of gerontology journal, something to do with gerontological medicine, or geriatric care management or something like that, and it was stressing a number of important freedoms that people should have when they're stuck in a facility because of their mental condition, or not their mental condition, their health status. And one of those things that this article posited that people should have the right to is the right to masturbate. It's true. In your hospital room or your nursing home room or whatever. A fundamental right that people should have is to be allowed some privacy to do those things that you do in private with your privates. But as often as I've encountered this in reading the literature and keeping up on stuff, I still find that it's a pretty alien concept to any actual caregivers that I encounter in the course of my consulting or my supervising. But they are, you do have to take that holistic approach, whether you're talking about sexuality or not. There's a lot of things that make it difficult for somebody to adapt to the role of being sick, and it can often cause despair and hopelessness, or withdrawal and apathy, or any number of other things that people certainly have a right to be that way if that's how they want to be. But we kind of have an obligation to offer an alternative, to encourage an alternative that leads to good health and happiness and freedom from suffering. And sometimes there's nothing you can do. And sometimes all you can do is listen, and that's fine. And I like doing that too, because there's this kind of sense that no matter how many therapies or how many options you have available to you, sometimes when you're sitting down with that one patient, just that one encounter for half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour, or however long it is, might be the only therapeutic measure that's undertaken at all. It might just be you. You might be it. There might not be a massage therapist. They might not want a massage therapist. They might not want psychotherapy at the bedside. They might not want a social worker to visit. all of these great interdisciplinary team members that we have to offer may not actually make it to the bedside for whatever reason. And so for the individual autonomous practitioner of a healthcare discipline, that's a useful yoga to consider, that you might be it, and anything that's important to do or figure out, you might want to do it or figure it out now, because you might not have another chance to later. And not just because of death, although that is something that you want to be aware of, but also because of logistics, or because of a declining ability to communicate or to understand other communication. So there's all sorts of reasons why we want to be aware of this. Where was I going with that? Well, I feel like I rambled for a good amount of time. It's time to find my way home now. Let's see, north or south? North or south? Yeah, I'm coming up on the more heavily populated roads here, so I'm a little leery about driving with my dome light on. It's not my dome light; it's one of the up front lights. Maybe that's okay. Is that street legal? Do any of you guys know? I don't know. I started off this overnight shift with a pronouncement. And I was kind of thinking, when I was pulling up, that it was somebody that I had just admitted this person to our service like a week ago, and I hadn't seen the guy since, and I was there at the beginning and at the end of this episode of Care. So for the family that was there, there was a lot on me to kind of massage this experience into something that the family could comprehend and cope with, and that's a really exciting and engaging challenge. It's a real test of all of your customer service skills and all of your empathy and compassion and all of your clinical knowledge. You have to communicate clearly, you have to communicate accurately, reasonable goals and expectations. You have to prepare people for what's coming. You have to educate people about what kind of services and help are available. And I usually like to leave a summary of it in writing. We've got a communication log that we give out on admission, and I usually like to collect my thoughts afterwards by just writing down a boiled down summary of the most important things to remember if you don't remember anything else. And there's kind of an art to that, like kind of the stripping out of this large complex chunk of information. What are actually the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things that you absolutely must remember for everyone's sake? And thinking of that kind of reminds me that my handwriting is extremely poor. I have very poor handwriting, but people seem to be able to read it okay. I would say my writing is better than a doctor's writing. Let me put it that way, than the stereotypical doctor's writing. Because I block print, I don't really block print. I never learned cursive really, so I just write the letters, like individually. I don't do like cursive or anything, and I think that makes my script easier to read. I think cursive just basically assumes that as long as you can read the first letter and the last letter, your brain will interpolate the rest with like a landmark in between here or there. And that's fine, but as somebody who has worked in milieus that don't have electronic charting, predominantly don't have electronic charting, cursive is the bane of my existence. There was this one order that this very well-known, very well-respected surgeon had written on an order sheet on a patient I was admitting into the nursing home, and this was before I was familiar with that particular physician and knew what his standard orders were. You kind of relies on tribal knowledge. You have to get a feel for these people and predict what they're going to do in advance, because to just look at it as a novice, which I did, to just look at this guy's writing, I had no clue what this one particular phrase was. And I was like running like anagram searches, like anagram solvers and web searches, and I was like Googling like, you know, commonly issued orders after, this was after a total knee arthroplasty, you know. This was after a total knee arthroplasty. And keep in mind I was a novice when this happened, so, you know, this is kind of a mistake or confusion that novices make. I finally called one of the MD's, like a physician's assistants, or one of his nurses or secretaries or something, and they looked at it because they, you know, they had the original that they faxed over to me, and it took them a few seconds to think about it, but they're like, oh, no stationary biking. I'm like, no stationary biking, really? I had never seen that written as an order before, but apparently this man writes it on all of his post-surgical orders, which is a very, you know, I mean, that's a very reasonable thing to order. Once I knew to look for it, I saw that a lot more people had been writing that, and in the milieu I was working in, it was really more of a note for the physical therapists than for the nurses, because in my time as a charge nurse, I have never compelled somebody or offered or suggested to somebody that they do any stationary biking. That's not something I'm likely to suggest in that specific environment, you know. But I guess it's very important for people who have total knee arthroplasties not to do any stationary biking for a while. And that's good, you know, it's a good thing to know. But I could not for the life of me figure out what it meant. I thought it was like, I don't know what I thought it was. I think I thought it was like some kind of medication, and then I thought it was like part of the wound care orders, and I was like looking for words that had to do with bandages in it, you know. But I saw the word no. The word no was very clear. No something something. No something something. I wonder what it is he doesn't want us to do. I mean, you could see how that would be concerning to me during an admission. You know, it's like, there's this thing that we're not supposed to do. It's really important, but I don't know what it is. And there was another time when something like that happened too. This was with the same doctor, very same orthopedic surgeon, who, you know, by all accounts is, you know, brilliant, like one of the best in the business in our area. And I got a transcription, or like an automatic dictation machine or whatever. It was like text typed out from the doctor who dictated it, and I hope that it was translated by a machine and that a person was not responsible for the mangled transcription that I saw in front of me. But this was the guy's, you know, dictation of his discharge orders and the discharge summary, and it said something on, like, to the effect of no blank to dressing. It had something to do with the dressing, something that we were not supposed to do to it, and I had no idea what it was. I had to call a PA, and then the PA on call had to call another PA, and they were both extremely sorry that they did not know what it was that we were not supposed to do to the dressing, but they assured me that they would find out right away and get back to me. Now, of course, you know, this is somebody coming in for an admission at like 6 o'clock at night to the nursing home, like during my, you know, 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, and I've got to take down the dressing and examine this wound before this person, you know, wants to go to bed, you know, which they reasonably expect. They're tired, they just got out of the hospital, they want to sleep, and I've got to harass them with, you know, memory health examination and a wound assessment. But I forget what the mystery was. I think he just didn't want us to put any ointment on the wound itself or something like that. I don't remember what it was exactly, but you know, there's some really hilarious mix-ups, you know, that can show up. I get really suspicious about dictated summaries when they have very strange spelling errors in them, like KCl. You know, people will talk about KCl pretty commonly, potassium chloride. You know, something. It's a potassium replacement supplement that you see really frequently in people who have diuretics ordered that are not potassium sparing. And the automatic dictation transcription spelled KCL, not the letter K, uppercase K, uppercase C, lowercase l, as you would expect. It was spelled K-A-Y space C-I-E-L, like KCL. Oh, KCL. Oh, okay, KCL. Okay, I got it. Very, very funny. I wish I could remember more of my funny transcription hiccups that I've seen. I used to know a bunch of really funny ones from memory. but I don't remember them anymore. I just turned my dome light off because there's a state trooper barreling down the highway with lights and sirens on, and I'm kind of curious what he's up to. Sirens on. Yep, sirens are on. Yep, here he goes. Oh boy. See, I'm so paranoid, I thought that he had seen my dome light on and then turned around from the opposite end of the highway, the opposite direction of traffic, and then started screaming down the highway just to come and get me. But no. Nope. I'm in the clear for now. But oh yeah, some really funny auto dictation errors. I'll have to try to write some of them down sometime. I don't read as many hospital discharge summaries as I used to as a SNF nurse. I do read some as a hospice nurse, but it's usually like more for my own information than like something I have to do to glean, useful data out of it for like some kind of specific work process. And then, there's the ones that aren't transcription errors. They're just like straight up, out and out errors that somebody should have caught. And sometimes they're just mind-boggling. And, nurses who work at hospitals would like joke with me about it. It's like they think it's funny that they discharge somebody to a nursing home with an incomplete W-10 or a missing MIMR, which I don't want to explain. You can look that up. Or, incomplete medication and treatment orders. They're like, oh yeah, whatever, they'll figure it out. And this used to eat up a lot of my time as a nursing supervisor. I'd have to, call people up at the hospital, harass people, page doctors, and people would get snippy with me, and I would get snippy right back with them because some of these orders were just ridiculous. Like, a really common post-surgical order is for somebody to have Vicodin 5500, 1 to 2 tablets every 6 hours as needed, or something. That's pretty common order. And instead of that very common order, what I found on a electronically produced discharge medication list, like a discharge reconciliation med list, it said hydromorphone, which is the active ingredient, which is the opiate ingredient in Vicodin. Tylenol is the other part of it. But it just said hydromorphone as needed. Now, for those of you playing along at home, there's a few crucial things that are missing from that order. One of them is the dosage. How much hydromorphone should we give? The other one is the route. Should we give them the hydromorphone by mouth, or should we be sticking it up their rectum? Sounds hilarious, but mistakes like this happen. No route was specified. If it was meant to be taken orally, it should have had PO written next to it, per aura, by mouth. And then a frequency, how often should this person take this medication? And then an indication whether they should take it every X number of hours, or they should take it X number of hours if they need it. That's another important thing to put in there. So, it's flabbergasting sometimes, and I'll call up and I'll point these things out to people, and at first they're like really snide and dismissive until I guide them to look at exactly what I'm looking at, and they're usually not as combative after that, although still hostile in a passively aggressive way. But yeah, some other crazy order mix-ups that I've seen are like like wounds care orders that don't make sense, or wounds care orders that are missing a frequency. Somebody might just order like, oh, just put a dry clean dressing on it. I'm like, oh, okay, very good. Should we change it at all? How often should we change the bandage? There is this one surgeon, I forget his name, he's a surgeon in this area, who had a couple of really interesting orders that I slowly got used to over the course of seeing his patients, but it came as a shock to me all of a sudden when I started seeing them, was that, after surgery, he would do a wound check in the hospital, and then the nurses in the hospital would put gauze dressing on the surgical wounds, a knee. These were knees usually. And then and then cover it with like a waterproof dressing, like Tegaderm or something like that. Like a vapor permeable waterproof dressing, which is really common for surgical dressings. And then he would write us orders not to change the dressing, to leave the dressing in place until the follow-up, like 4 or 5 weeks later. And that just flies in the face of everything we've been taught about dressing changes. That the wound has to be assessed, it has to be looked at for signs and symptoms of infection. You have to clean out you have to cleanse the wound with sterile saline and make sure that the germs on the body aren't invading the wound and all this stuff. And there's all this sensible wound care stuff that we've been trained to do at the order of a physician. And so to see this order just totally flew in the face of everything we've been taught. And he also would order 1 milligram of Coumadin, which is a rat poison that they use that they give people to for anticoagulation, so their blood doesn't clot as easily. But he would order 1 milligram of Coumadin every day by mouth, but he would specifically order no INRs. And the INR, or the International Normalized Ratio, is something that we measure on people who are taking Coumadin to make sure that the anticoagulation effect is not too high. Because if your blood is too anticoagulated, it's going to start leaking out of your blood vessels, which could cause, like a brain bleed, and a bunch of other things that could go wrong with that, or, bleeding into your peritoneal cavity, or, basically just blood going into some place where it's not supposed to be. And the reversal agent for Coumadin, also called warfarin, also called rat poison, is vitamin K. So in certain circumstances, we might be called upon to inject somebody with vitamin K to reverse the anticoagulation effect of Coumadin. Because vitamin K is one of the factors in the clotting cascade, which is very complicated, and there's like 30-something chemicals involved. And forgive me, but I've never taken organic chemistry, and I hope never to take organic chemistry, so cascade reactions are somewhat of a mystery to me, but suffice it to say, it's a bunch of things that all happen in a certain sequence, but also all at once, all of the time, everywhere in your body. But yeah, normally we would take INRs, but this guy said not to do any INRs, and so I've said I was really concerned about both of these things, but now I have to say, all of his patients came out just great. They all healed up really well. They all endured their physical therapy very well, which is very important. Their pain was very well controlled with the medications they were prescribed. Everybody did really, really, really well. I did have to call this guy once because one of his patients at our SNF, the bandage, I guess, got pulled off or something. Like, she slid against the sheets, and part of the bandage rolled up and it wasn't sealed anymore. So I had to call him for an order to change the bandage because he had specifically ordered no bandage changes, no dressing changes. So that kind of put me in a funny position because here I am, she's got a non-intact, he or she has a non-intact dressing, and that's risk for infection, and I have to do something about it, and I can't just let it sit there. And so I had to call him to get an order to replace the dressing, which he gave, but he made it very clear that this was a one-time order to change the dressing times 1 now. So it's interesting that people have leeway to kind of make up their own ways of doing things. And no matter how strange they seem to me, all I have to do is assess people and monitor them and keep track of people, and keep my editorializing to myself. If I think something is strange, if I think something is really strange, obviously I'll question it. If it's something that I think is obviously inappropriate. But I give people the benefit of the doubt most of the time. I've seen some funny stuff, but the proof is in the pudding, as one of my favorite patients used to say. She always used to say the proof was in the pudding, and she always took her pills with pudding. And that was our joke. Whenever things were going wrong, or symptoms were out of control, or nothing was going right, or mood was just off, the proof was in the pudding. There it is. The proof is in the pudding. Almost home now. I drove back. I've been driving back from a town that's about a half hour away. I see. About a half hour has gone by since I started this video, so I think that's enough ranting and raving for now. I'll keep it running until I pull into my driveway, just to get some closure, so you can know that I made it home safely. I always wonder, which one of these videos is going to be the one where I'm in the middle of talking and I get into a car accident. It's going to happen one of these days if I keep doing this up. Or maybe not. I've never been in a car accident. I've never been in a car accident while I was the driver, let me put it that way. I think a lifetime of playing video games has prepared me for the rigors of driving. Driving is a very it's a very like floodlight awareness rather than spotlight awareness kind of task. You gotta tag everything around you. You gotta scan things for motion, and take some eye-hand coordination. And I never liked racing games when I was little, but I think it was the video games in general that prepared me for driving. Well, I'm kind of glad the phone hasn't rang. My phone was ringing off the hook up until I went out for my last visit about 9 o'clock or so. This is around the time of night, like around 10:45 or so, that if anybody calls after this time of night, I can be pretty sure. Oh, it's 10:45 right now. Yeah. If anybody calls like from here on out, I can be pretty sure that something has gone terribly wrong. Like people don't like get up and call you at 2 o'clock in the morning just for shits and giggles. Not that anybody does anyway. Pretty much all the time people are calling for very good reasons, and I'm very glad that they called, and I'll tell them that I'm very glad that they called. Anything that wasn't sorted out by bedtime, anything that can't be sorted out in the morning is either an extreme symptom crisis that is not being managed with medication, or a new symptom, or a death. Very frequently it's a death. Oh yeah, that's what I was talking about. I started off my day with my overnight shift with a pronouncement. Yeah. I've just started carrying death certificates in my car now. I've got a stack of them in the back seat. I'm learning, slowly, like item by item. There's like certain items that you always want to have on you. The first one that this occurred to, when I first got hired, I just grabbed stuff out of the supply room that I thought I would need, which ended up being very different from the things that I did actually need. I was getting different kinds of exotic dressing supplies and all this other stuff, and a lot of that stuff did come in handy, but not as frequently as the other stuff that I should have been putting in there, like bedpans. And that was the first time I had to drive an hour back and forth from a patient's house to the office, back to the patient's house to pick up a bedpan. You better believe I started carrying bedpans around with me. And then with a recent admission, it was incontinence care supplies, like incontinence briefs and Chuck's pads and stuff like that. And death certificates. Those are things I always need to carry with me. They're kind of interesting to look at. I'm sure you can look them up online if you've never seen one. It kind of like sums up somebody's life and death into a single 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of paper. It's very interesting. Well, that's it for tonight. I will see you next time. Next day that I'm working is Labor Day. That should be fun. It should be a good time.